Welcome to another edition of Running Against the Wind. This is Sal Albanese, and my podcast today will focus on something that's been bothering me for a number of years. That is the lack of local reporting that has really become a ghost of itself. When I was a council member in Brooklyn, Bay Ridge, Dyker Heights, Sunset Park, there were a number of newspapers that covered the local scene, and even did investigative reporting. Now it's almost all gone. There were still some great local papers out there, but generally speaking, there's been a diminution of an important component of coverage in New York City, especially at the local level. And I'm glad today to have a real expert to talk about the topic. Mark Healey is the editor-in-chief of the Rockaway Wave, which is one of the most successful local papers in New York City. 131 years in existence, covering the Rockaways. And Mark's been the editor for 11 years. I want to start by welcoming him and then asking, how did Rockaway select somebody to run their newspaper who's not from Rockaway?
That's a great question. Thanks, Sal. It's great to see you. Just for the folks listening and watching, I had Sal, when Sal ran for mayor, I had him on our podcast here at the Wave. So it was great meeting you then and keeping in touch over the years, of course. I think that I believe I'm the first and probably only non-Rockaway resident ever to become the editor-in-chief of the Wave. And I think it had to do with, look, my career has always been timing is everything. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
And, so when the Wave position became available, I had just ended a career on Sirius XM where I was hosting a baseball show. And I had worked at the AP for 8 years. So it was at a time where, and I had worked for a short time in community news back in 2007 at the Chronicle, at the Queens Chronicle. I was the editor-in-chief there for a short time. So, it wasn't like I hadn't done it before, but I remember when they interviewed me, they were like, well, you're not from Rockaway. So why are you even interviewing for this job? And I said, well, look, my dad grew up in Rockaway. He grew up at the St. John's Home for Boys. He was an orphan. And, when we went to the beach in the summer, it was always Rockaway. I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in Flatbush. So I knew Rockaway. And then a lot of people from our neighborhood in Flatbush moved to Rockaway. So, I had been coming here my whole life. We had a cabana at the Breezy Point Surf Club. So, I knew Rockaway. Certainly it was a place that I was very well aware of. And as I told them during the interview, I said, look, journalism is journalism. If I can cover something as alien to me as, international golf, which I did at times, the International PGA Tour, if I could cover that, without having anything and hating golf, really, I could do anything. Journalism is journalism. I said, look, I know you're uneasy about it. Give me 2 weeks. If after 2 weeks I don't know what I'm doing, then we'll call it even, and that'll be fine. So 11 years later, I'm still here.
It's amazing. Yeah, I saw that you had a celebration on your 10th anniversary, I believe.
Our community editor, John Shitling, wrote a really nice piece. And, it's been great. It's been, I love riding the wave, and it's been fantastic. It's been a great chapter of my career. Absolutely. No question.
I enjoyed visiting with you when I was running for mayor, and, you got a great office there, and you really spent a lot of time with me as a candidate, especially someone who was sort of an outsider at the time. We were polling at a very low level, and I was also proud that you guys endorsed me in 2013, which was I got your endorsement and the Chiefs endorsement. The civil service newspaper at that time.
Yes.
But yeah, I also know that you were a sports, as you pointed out, journalist for years, and I know you still have your hand in that as well. And I know you're a big Met fan, so I follow even though I'm a Yankee fan, I follow your commentary about the New York Mets and how you've been close to that organization for years. You covered them, I believe, right? Years
Well, I
ago.
covered the Yankees too. I covered the Mets and the Yankees. I still write about both, but
Yeah.
being the editor-in-chief of the Wave, that takes up most of my time. I still do write about the Mets and the Yankees, and I obviously am a Mets fan.
Right.
But I loved covering the Yankees. I covered the Yankees from like 2005 till about I was at the World Series in 2009, covering the World Series for Baseball Digest. So, I love covering the Yankees too. I mean, it's baseball. Baseball is baseball, and I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that aspect of my career.
That's
working
great.
baseball. Yeah.
I'm a big baseball fan, so I mean, that's what kept me in school as a kid. I played varsity baseball for John Jay. I was not into academics. I had to pass 3 subjects to stay on the baseball team. So I've been a baseball fanatic. And I still am. My wife complains about me watching too much baseball, but it's the greatest. It's the greatest sport in the world.
I agree.
In my view, and so let's talk about the local media and its erosion over the years. I mean, I was a councilman from 82 to 97, and during that whole period, as I pointed out, we had a number of local newspapers, and they had some really excellent reporters. And now I see most of the media outlets, even here on Staten Island Advance. I moved here a couple of years ago because my kids are here. They used to do actually deep dives on candidates, on issues, and sometimes they would piss off, as they should, local elected officials when they uncovered something, or and that seems to have gone by the wayside. And we don't have that kind of deep dive. I mean, I know the Wave still endorses and talks to candidates. I saw your interview with Curtis Sliwa, which was really very good during this last campaign. So what's happened? Why do we have these, what I consider a problem? Because a lot of stuff on the local level gets ignored. I mean, the Times used to have a Metro section. They don't even have that anymore. We used to have the Village Voice, Barrett and Newfield covering a lot of the dirt that goes on in politics, unfortunately, and a lot of the scandals. It's gone. So why did it happen, and can anything be done? Can the city help to revive local journalism somehow, some way?
Well, there have been efforts. Look, there's a lot of different things. So let's talk about what you just mentioned about the government or the city helping. There have been efforts to help local journalism, with tax credits and things like that, where the city would set up, but it hasn't come to fruition. The city has talked about it. At the end of the day, I really don't believe that that's ever going to happen, because there are too many elected officials. And I'm not just talking about Rockaway. I'm talking about just in general. There's too many elected officials. I call them politicians because it annoys them. But that's what they are. Let's be honest. They don't like to be criticized, even when it's legitimate, even when it's, and there's so much noise out there. There's so much uncredentialed, toxic commentary out there. And it's sad when elected officials can't differentiate between legit criticism and, legit calling them out for things that they said they were going to do, and when they don't do it. And look, I can give you 1,000 examples, but that's not the point. The point is, I don't have a lot of faith in the city ever coming up with something that helps us. But also, by the same token, I kind of don't want it, because, they'll hold it over your head. I mean, we see it with city agencies all the time. I'm not going to mention any, St. Parks. um, who, we have, New York City Parks runs Howard Beach in
Yes.
Rockaway, which is the #1 beach in New York City. Sorry, Coney Island, but we are. Um, Everybody comes here because they surf here. You just can't compare the two. And I love Coney Island, um, but New York City Parks treats Howard Beach or beaches like it's a park, and it's not. And so, because of that, because they have that cookie cutter approach in dealing with us, we are constantly criticizing them. So, New York City Parks is not going to go out of its way to support something that we're doing. And, and look, I'll sit down with them. I'll talk to them. There have been multiple examples of us reaching out, trying to help. But when a city agency, DHS, with Department of Homeless Services, when we were criticizing them during the de Blasio administration, because they say they're going to communicate with the community before they open a homeless shelter. And then they say it's only going to be a family shelter. And then it turns into an all men's shelter, and they don't communicate with us. And we call them out for that. Then they criticize us, and then they don't want to talk to us. And then they don't want to be transparent. So that's the government angle of it. But look, at the end of the day, it's all about revenue. Okay. Generating revenue, because printing costs money. A staff costs money. Overhead costs money. And we have a subscription model. Like, so we don't have a free paper. And that's a whole nother ball of wax. But because we have a paywall, because we are 50 cents, cheaper than 3 cups of coffee, 50 cents, I believe our yearly subscription is $19 a year, which is really like half the newsstand price. But it's revenue. And when you're reliant on print advertising, because digital advertising, even though it's prevalent now, a lot of digital advertising, it's not nearly as, nearly as much of a revenue stream as print advertising is. And then people think that social media is how they get the word out. But it's like, when I always tell people, you can like something on Instagram, you can like something on Twitter, you can like something on Facebook, but that's not a vote. That doesn't generate revenue. You're not supporting local journalism by visiting, their Facebook page or their Instagram account or interacting with them on Twitter. The only way to really help local journalism, really, to me, is, and that's where we're very, very fortunate here in Rockaway, is our readership loves us and they believe in us, and we have a very healthy subscriber base. So when advertising revenue goes down, which it does, it fluctuates, obviously. When small businesses are suffering, the Wave suffers, because the Wave's a small business,
Yes.
just like all the other small business owners. So there's really, it's about revenue. It's not even about anything else, because we have quality journalism here. John Schilling, as I mentioned before, our community editor, the guy's fantastic. He's absolutely wonderful. And he was a freelancer with us when he was in college, and then he was freelancing with us when he was going to graduate school. And soon as he was available, I told him, I said, look, when you're looking for a job, I want you to be my next community editor. And and he a lot of places wanted to hire him when he came out of CUNY Newmark. So I was very lucky that he said yes and came on board with us. So it's not a question that we have excellent freelancers. We have really committed people that really care about the paper here. So we're very lucky in that aspect. But really, not every community is supporting their local newspapers the way Rockaway supports the Wave. So that's a big issue. And it's not just the readers. Again, it's advertising. And that's why there are some communities where, and I know there's examples out there. I don't want to go through them, but there are examples where elected officials have really tried to kind of control the media, the local media, because they think they're independent and they think that they can push them around.
Mhm.
You know, they won't push around the New York Times. They won't push around, you know, the Washington Post. They won't push around, you know, the Daily News or the New York Post, but they'll push around, you know, somebody from a local paper because they think, oh, well, who reads it anyway? That type of thing. It's that type of, you know, and when they're not getting the support of the local businesses, they're not getting the support of the local readers. When that paper goes away, people are like, oh man, I really wish we had our local paper. Well, that would have been helpful, you know, when the paper was there. And I'll tell you this. I used to work, one of my early jobs was I was the evening news director and evening news anchor at a radio station up in Rockland County called WRKL. And that had been around forever. And so I was working there, and there was like a real kind of push and pull between us and the Gannett paper, the Journal up there. There was always like, you know, oh well, you know, Wave just WRKL just reads our stories on the air, which wasn't the case. And so when WRKL was bought out by a Polish broadcasting network, and they only played polka music and everything was in Polish, the Gannett ran a piece. Well, we really missed WRKL. Well, and you supported the station, you know, all those years that you kind of like went after them. You know, maybe that radio station, you know, so it's not just newspapers too. It's any kind of local journalism because of the cost, the high cost of putting out a quality product. You know, it's not just the local newspapers that are suffering. It's places like WRKL.
It's amazing. It really is. I mean, yeah, I know that you said you really are of a mixed feeling about whether the city should help the local media. But I mean, if there was a you know, sort of a ironclad law which allows the city, mandates that the city contribute to the local journalism instead of just depending on, you know, some politicians. And you're right, a lot of politics don't want coverage
Right.
on a local level. They get very offended, which is, you know, ridiculous, but that's the way it is. But I look at the BBC model, for example, right? I mean, that's a government supported operation, right? Something to that effect could be thought about in terms of this. Everybody complain. By the way, Mark, I'm not the only one. A lot of people complain about the local reporting, that it's gone away, you know, and people want it. They want to know what's going on in their neighborhood, besides just the, you know, the usual ads about, you know, birthdays and, you know, all that stuff.
Right.
They want to know. They want deep dives into what elected officials are doing. I think I'm pretty savvy because I've been around the block a couple of times politically. I see a lot of stuff here on Staten Island that elected officials do. It's really outrageous in some cases, but it's not covered. It's just not covered. And
Right.
you know, and I think that's a cardinal sin. I don't know what the answer is, but maybe the answer is a certain allocation. So that, I mean, it is a revenue issue. You're absolutely right. Reporters cost money, staff, and all of that stuff. I mean, I remember also there's also some of the local papers in the city that are still around. I remember when I was running, they basically, it's like an extortion racket, right? If you don't, you got to take out an ad to get coverage. They pretty much let that out for you, which I think is outrageous. But
Well,
yeah,
we don't do that. I mean, we don't do that. We don't. That's not something we do. But you know, but I get what you're saying. I mean, yes, you know, uh, the reason I'm hesitant. That's the word. Hesitant to have any kind of you know, stipend or something like that that comes from the city is that for every agency person, like let's say there was a, you know, an agency abroad, a media agency, right? Um, they I just would be hesitant because we would have, you know, so well, you know, you wrote that story on such and such, and you know, we really don't want to contribute because of, you know, the negative criticism towards, you know,
right.
And you know, and here's the other thing too. When you're dealing with, there are people, and I've heard stories from other newspapers. Like I've spent time and commiserated with, people from other, with the New York Press Association, people from all over the five boroughs that run local papers and publishers and editors and reporters. There are advertisers that try to control the dialogue. There are people like that. There are subscribers
Yep.
who try to say, well, you don't support the candidate we support, so we want to cancel our subscription. And I handle all of it the same. Um, I
How do
say,
you,
look,
what do you do?
well, what I do, I'll tell you what I do, Sal. What I do is, look, you point to find 5 stories that we did not report fairly on whatever issue you're talking about. I'm not going to say who the elected official is. We had an elected official send their new chief of staff to our office to complain about why they don't advertise with us anymore. Because somebody had, randomly called up, because we always call. We call everybody. It's like, you
Right.
want to take out an ad for this? You want to take out an ad for that? Oh, I see you have an event coming up. Do you want to advertise for it? Because they have the budget. They can certainly advertise. So this person came in and said, well, you didn't cover this festival last year. I said, oh, really? We didn't? So I got up, I went to the back, and I got that edition for that event. And it was on the front page. It's like, what do you mean we didn't cover it? What do you have in mind? He goes, oh, yeah, well, somebody said, I said, well, somebody said wrong. I said, all you have to do, I said, I am here all the time. If you have an issue, you have a problem, you call me or you email me. And, and if we screw up or if we did something, I'll say, okay, I own it. I mean, I've done it a million times. I was wrong about this. I was ill-informed, but I got to be honest with you. 9 times out of 10, when people say we don't cover something, or we're not at that part of the peninsula, or we're not on this part of the peninsula, 9 times out of 10, they're incorrect. And then when I send them the correction or I send them the story, they're like, oh, I'm sorry. It must have been another paper. Okay. I mean, you just have to be confident.
Right.
Like if you second guess yourself, it's one thing to be accountable and it's another thing to second guess yourself because you're afraid of criticism. Like I said, when I first took this job, when people were questioning whether or not I was from Rockaway, or I said to say, look, if I don't know what I'm doing, let me know. If I get something wrong, let me know. The job is to be accurate, not to be first. It's great when you're first and it's accurate. I mean, that's obviously the perfect storm, but it's about being accurate. So when you're accurate, that's the best defense. Not that you want to play, defense when you're dealing with all these different issues. But if you're accurate, I can always go to bed at night because I don't have to remember what I said. I sleep fine because, I have a very good idea of what we do. John Schilling, our community editor, is excellent. We have Kerry Murtha, who does our Wavemaker columns and other freelance work. We have a great staff. So I know when somebody says they're going to cover something or somebody says, we quoted this person, I know they'll have their notes, so they'll have their recordings of the things that were said and the things that weren't said. And I'll be honest, Sal, the Wave has been, we won awards for our coverage, and they're well deserved because our people are smart.
I was always impressed with the newspaper, and I know a lot of people who live in the Rockaways. Everybody reads your papers, so and refers to stories there. I mean, look. Reporters and editors make mistakes sometimes, like everyone
Sure.
else, and they just correct things, right? The next day they say, we want to correct this, but most of the
You just
time
can't hide from it, Sal. You just can't hide from it,
no,
Because
absolutely.
that's not really what we said. No, well, you did. You wrote it, so own it. It's just like it's the same thing that we expect of our elected officials. If you said it and you made a mistake, just say you made a mistake. I shouldn't have
Right.
said it. But a lot of times, let's be honest, they try to run away from it. And and that's why sometimes they don't want to talk to us because they're afraid that they'll say something. I know that you supported Mondani Zorhan, the mayor elect,
Yeah.
during his campaign. Um, he promised that he would talk to us. He promised he would come to Beach 129th Street and Beach 116th Street and visit. And this was back in August. And, we had, he never ever lived up to that promise. And
He didn't.
up until the end, he did not. So that's why, it's not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons we did not endorse him. And the same thing with Andrew Cuomo. And Andrew was supposed to sit down with an interview with John Schilling and blew it off because he was going to his endorsement event with Eric Adams and then never rescheduled it. So, I mean, don't say yes if you're not going to follow through.
Yeah.
And, I mean, look,
I
did they think because we did an interview with Curtis that we interview everyone.
yeah.
The only people that we don't interview are the ones that say no or who ghost us.
Did you interview Mamdani?
Well, we did when he came. John Schilling did when he came to Far Rockaway. We had a few minutes with him, but it was during that interaction after John had interviewed him, and we did we did some video and some stuff on Twitter, and we put it in the in the newspaper. He said to me, I shook my hand and said, I will come to your office and sit down with you, and never did.
That's
And
not a
we were in constant contact with his campaign office and his press office, and he just never followed through.
well. That's
And then,
yeah.
well,
That's
here's the thing
disappointing.
too, Sal. Here's the thing too. And again, it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean we can't work with him. It doesn't mean we wouldn't sit down with him now after he's won. The thing is that to me, when you run for office, sitting down with the local paper is your job interview, just
Yep.
like debates. And when we host a debate, I've hosted and I've moderated several debates here in Rockaway. Uh, I've never had somebody come up to me after a debate that I've moderated and say, "Well, that was one-sided," or "You really, didn't do what you were supposed to do." It's always been the opposite, and it's not about me patting myself on the back. It's just this is what we do. Whatever your perception of what Rockaway is or what the Wave is, you got to talk to us. And if
Yeah.
you don't like the way the interview's going, or then that's your moment. That's your
I,
moment to say you're not being fair. And so I was. They tried to say, well, we can give you 5 minutes tomorrow. It's like, no, no. I said it's a minimum of 15 minutes, a minimum, and it has to be on camera. And I said, how is it not easy to do 15 minutes on Zoom? And then they never, ever called back.
yeah.
So,
That's a big
you
mistake.
know,
Listen, I support Mamdani for a variety of reasons. One is I think he's not corrupt. He's independent. He's bringing a lot of people into the process. But I have criticized the campaign. I've said, for example, on the South Shore of Staten Island, the Mid Island, there were no appearances there. Well, I understand it's not friendly territory, but I do believe if you go into communities and you sit down with the local paper and you sit down, you have a town hall meeting, it will demonstrate to people you care about them, even if you're not going to do well there, but you can also reduce the hostility and the
right.
antipathy towards you by doing that. I briefed, David Dinkins was the mayor and Bay Ridge was heavily Giuliani territory, and he did some really good things. Whenever I called him, he delivered, right, for my neighborhood. I could point to a number of things in terms of public safety, alternate side of the street. So I advised the mayor, when he was coming to Bay Ridge, I said, Mr. Mayor, just talk about the accomplishments that you made, the service you were provided. And by the way, he did that at a town hall meeting, and there were people nodding, people that were not really, friendly towards him or supported him. So I think it's important for people like Zorian to come to the Rockaways, where he obviously got got beat up pretty bad. I saw the numbers. Cuomo got like 90% of the vote in the Rockaways, right? That the
Well,
uh,
yeah. I mean, look, here's the thing. I've said this 1,000 times, and I can't take credit for it because it was Scott Stringer that said it to me when he was, I guess, he had been comptroller for about 2 years at this point,
right.
and we sat down at we were in on the boardwalk in Far Rockaway at the Dread Surfer Grill, and we were having a conversation. That wasn't like he had come to Rockaway a bunch of times, Scott,
Yep.
to talk with us, and so I was a fan of Scott in the beginning, and we had a really great conversation, and he said to me, because we were talking about that, so why doesn't Bill De Blasio come to the West End? I know why he doesn't, because he doesn't have a lot of support down there, and he gets booed when he goes there. I said, but so Scott said, well, what Bill has to understand, what the mayor has to understand is he's not just the leader of the people who voted for him.
Right.
He's the leader of the city. He's the leader
Yes.
of everyone. So if you're not going somewhere where they're going to, criticize you or yell at you or boo, you still got to do it. You still have to go, and you still have to
Absolutely.
reach out to people. I have a big problem when people, when people don't do that. And here's the thing, Sal, instead of listening to a smart guy like you sometimes, or other people who are really have a lot of integrity, when they give a candidate or an elected official, advice like that, more often than not, they listen to you know, their posse,
Yes.
their inner circle, like,
Yes.
no, 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 you'll get booed. I remember when Bloomberg was a mayor, he had made a comment about, the quote unquote, I don't know if he said Irish drunks, or he said something about drunks yelling at him along the parade route,
Yeah, I remember that.
something like that. I forget
Yeah.
exactly. It was in the Wave,
Yeah.
and um, and they were like, he better not come to the parade, and he better not do this. And he showed up, and they're all
Yeah.
booing him, and he's smiling and laughing, and he showed up anyway.
Yep.
And to me, like, that's what you're supposed to do. And De Blasio, Bill, um, he would come to the parade late. He would only come, he
Uh,
would skip certain neighborhoods and only show up on Beach
yeah, he's a
116th Street.
well,
And
yeah. Don't
so
get me started on
I
De Blasio. I can
I
go
know, I
chapter
know,
and verse. The guy's a
I know.
coward, but that's
But
besides the
but
story.
but that's what I'm saying. Like, to me, it's about being that's all part of the accountability, right? That's all
Yes.
part of being
Yes.
available, being transparent. You can't I get how difficult it is. I mean, you know, just being in my house and having to debate my family about different things. I get it. There's a lot of
Yep.
pressure to, being the editor in chief of a newspaper, a local newspaper, who may not always agree with my editorials, or who may not always agree with who we endorse. Um, you have to be transparent. You can't just say, well, this is this way because I said it is. You have to be open, and you have to sit down with people, and you have to talk to them. And so that's
No,
really
absolutely.
what
You don't
that's
mind
what
if I
part.
point out that Zorian Mondami promised to come and he didn't show up, right, on X? I mean, we're talking about it anyway. So I think it's a good lesson for him that
Yeah.
he's got to cover all the neighborhoods, even the people who didn't vote for him, and you can't avoid not talking to people, especially when you're the mayor, and the mayor elect. I think it's wrong, and I think that if he can have some concrete accomplishments that benefit everybody, including the people in Rockaway, the people in the South Shore, like property tax reform, which lowers their real estate tax. Things like that can really benefit him. He's got to deliver for the people. Soon he's got to meet with them. Just so in terms of the local media, so you're saying that the only real solution is that residents have to support their local paper. Is that
I
the
think
way?
that's the best solution. The best solution, because advertising revenue is fluctuates, and I've written editorials about it, where, um, you know, local restaurants. What happens to a local restaurant when people stop going to it? It could be the
Boy,
best restaurant on the
yeah.
planet, but if people stop going, it's the same. It's the same difference. If you own a bar, and people, you don't have your regulars. If you don't have your regulars who come all the time, I mean, yeah, you get tourist people, and we have a summer guide that comes out that's very popular that people get. We have different special issues during the course of the year that,
Hmm.
like, the casuals, or, the swing people, when they see something pretty, they'll pick it up and they'll, spend the 50 cents or whatever.
Right.
But it's your regulars, people live here all year round. It's not just a summer destination. So we're reliant on our regulars. We're reliant on our, uh, the people who subscribe to the paper,
You have
you
a
know?
lot of subscribers, I gather. You
Yeah.
have a lot.
I mean, that's the way that where we remain relevant. We have subscribe, and the thing is, we don't just have subscribers here in Rockaway. We have subscribers in the 5 boroughs. We have subscribers from across the country. We have people in
Why?
California.
Why
We have
is
people in
that?
California. Well, because they're from Rockaway.
So they just
They're
want to
originally
stay.
from Rockaway. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people from Rockaway that want to keep in touch
Yeah.
with what's happening in Rockaway. One of my dad's one of the guys that my dad grew up with in the St. John's Home for Boys, when they were like 12, 13 years old. He had moved out. He was supposed to be my dad's best man, and then he moved
Hmm.
out to California because his sister was sick, or I forget the whole story, but they lost touch. So, but he was always a subscriber to the Wave because he was from, he grew up in Rockaway. So one day he sees a story that I wrote about my dad, who looks just like Terry Collins, who used to be the manager of the Mets. And I had
I
done a
remember,
story
yeah,
about,
actually, I saw that on X that
yeah.
you posted that. That's
So I got a
very
phone
interesting.
call. So I get a phone call at the Wave one day. This is years ago. This is like, I want to say 2017. And I said, this is, his nickname is Skippy. And I don't want to give his name out, whatever. But
Mhm.
he said, this is, is your dad, did your dad, Ron Healey, is that the Ron Healey that grew up in the St. John's Home for Boys? So I said, yeah. He says, oh, can you give me his number? I said, well, let me reach out, I'll let me talk to him. And he said, okay, just give him my number, right? So I call up my dad and I said, Dad, do you know this guy? And he goes, oh, that's Skippy. Oh, I love that guy, right? So they got reunited, through the Wave, which was crazy, right?
That's
The guy
amazing.
who's living in California hasn't seen my dad in like 50 years. And now they talk on the phone like all the time. It's
Well.
fantastic. So
So
yeah, so we have people we have people that would, I mean, I can't tell you how many emails I get from people. Uh, you know, I grew up in Rockaway, and there was a story in 1967 that was on page 5 of the paper. Can I get a copy of that? So that's the great thing about the Wave, and we are fortunate in that sense,
you're lucky, very
because
lucky.
of that
Yeah.
local support. But could we use more help? Sure, absolutely. It's difficult. The printing costs alone
Yeah.
are astronomical.
And you hesitated to raise the subscription price, I guess?
Yeah, we really don't want to do that.
Yeah.
We really don't want to do that. And it's like sometimes, people, and the hardest thing to do, Sal, is when you want to promote yourself. And, so let's say we had to raise it,
Right.
which, look, I guess it's inevitable. We're going to have
Yeah.
to raise it at some point.
Right.
Um, the last thing we want to do is be like, well, we're better than everybody else. We do this, we do that. We hate doing that. Um, But sometimes it's people sometimes don't miss something until it's gone. And the worst thing in the world that could happen is if the wave had to go away for people to appreciate what it is we do. Because I'll
Yeah,
tell you right now, if the wave wasn't around, people would know nothing about what's going on. They just wouldn't. They just wouldn't.
absolutely. And there's a lot going on in Rockaway, right? I mean, there's a lot of
Yes, absolutely.
controversies. I mean, you're right. The beaches are a major issue there. I follow it closely, and
The
yeah,
lifeguards, the
oh yeah,
staffing,
yeah,
the drownings,
yeah.
and that's just that. I mean, a dozen, there's a dozen issues every week that we have to deal with,
How
when it
many
comes to.
reporters do you have covering it?
Well,
More,
we have a community editor that does a lot of the legwork. Certainly myself. We also have about 4 or 5 freelancers on or off during the course of the year. We get interns, but our interns actually work. Like they
right?
actually go out and they do stuff. So we just had an event at a local high school, Scholars Academy. That's like a high school that's like upper echelon for
Yeah,
students as far as education is
yep.
concerned. So we had three interns working with us this year, and they were great. And we had a great event at the high school where we met like some of the parents and you know uh, it was fantastic. And that's what we're trying to grow the next generation of journalists. We're trying to you know reach the younger people, because the younger people seem to be the ones that we're missing out on. They don't want to pick up a paper, but honestly, recently what we've noticed is that um, the it used to be where our mobile readership on our digital platforms were at like 65%, and our people reading the newspaper or reading the website on PCs, home
Yeah.
home setups. It used to be like 65-35. Now it's almost even.
Wow.
So more and more people are reading, and readership is not down. So, you know, the
That's a
the
good thing.
yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah.
great because that means that people, younger people and older people, are now reading at the same level. It lets us know that there are people who actually care about the local issues, even if they don't necessarily agree with our editorials, or if they don't agree with, you know, why didn't you cover this or why didn't you cover that? But we the biggest thing that we do, um, and really it's all John and our staff here, is they listen. Sometimes I'm so locked in on certain things that I'm not listening as much as I should.
Right.
But whatever I miss, they get. You know, Marnie Ryan, who's our director of operations, she'll send me emails about, oh, this is going on, oh, this is going on. Make sure you don't miss this. And uh, our salesman, who's great, Chris Moriarty, like he lets us know what's going on in the neighborhood. He'll let us know, what business owners are telling him about things that are happening on the block or things that are happening in the business districts. So we have a lot of ears to the ground. We have an editorial advisory board, Sal, where we meet once a month. We meet with a bunch of people from the community, all different parts of Rockaway, who let us know, what they think of the paper and what
That's
what
fair.
what we should be covering and things like that. So
Wow.
we're constantly trying to um, be aware of what the issues are, and that's the only way you really can move forward. You know,
And I think what you're doing there obviously is successful. And maybe some of the other local outlets out there should be doing the same thing. You seem like you have your ear to the ground. You've got an advisory board, editorial advisory board. You've got people out there that are
right,
actually giving you great feedback. And I think that's part of what the papers have to do, right? Become relevant, really, making sure that they listen to what's going on in their neighborhood and publish stuff like that.
right.
Maybe they're not doing their job. I mean, I have to tell you, the local papers that I read are basically vacuous most of the time. It's you could tell they're not really covering the area well. It's just a lot of it's info entertainment. It's not
You
real. It's
have to
not real.
be right. Well, Sal, you have to be at the event. You
Right.
can't cover a neighborhood sitting at your computer
Right.
and waiting for emails to come in.
Right.
And look, I don't want to be that person, but because I don't like to point fingers, but what I do like to do is I like to look at all the different. So people will say, well, nobody wants to read the print paper. That's false, because our readers love it. If we went all
Uh-huh.
digital, again, the wave would go by the wayside.
Right.
People want to have. Some people do. Some people like having the paper.
Yeah.
Some people like having the physical paper. It's once a week,
Mhm.
and they like going through it and they like reading it that way. I miss getting a newspaper every day. I used to get 3 papers a day.
Yeah.
I don't have time. I have my own paper, but
You're,
I mean,
but you do have a digital aspect,
yeah,
right? Your social
sure.
media stuff, your podcasts, so people can actually get
Yes.
information about what's going on through that medium or
We
those
would like to be
mediums.
doing the podcast more, but really it's just a question of time at this point.
How often do
Uh,
you do it, Mark?
we do it when it comes up.
Okay.
When something comes up where somebody's going to sit down with us, if I had a producer, if I could afford to have somebody who could just produce the podcast,
All right.
we would have one every week,
Right.
or more than once a week. I mean, I was on Sirius XM, I hosting a podcast is not difficult for me.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
if I had, but it's all about support, right? It's all about booking
Yeah.
guests and making sure you have
Producers and all that
a
stuff. Yeah.
sponsor and things like that. So, um, it's time management, it's cost effectiveness and that
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
concentrate, really our bread and butter is the paper, is the physical paper. And then everything we do for the physical paper is produced digitally, but we also have stories that only run on the website. We have stories
Right.
that only run in the newspaper. And we do that because we want that diversity of delivery, to different readers. Uh, you know, and one of the things that we sorry about that. One of the things
Okay.
that we just my wife uh checking up on me. One of the things that we do, we do is we pay attention to those numbers. We pay attention to what are people reading online. We have a reader survey that goes out in the print paper. And people will let us know what they want to see more of, what they want to see less of. It's all about data.
That's great.
If you know your readers, you can respond to them. If you don't, and you don't listen, and you're not paying attention, um, well, then you're going to lose out, and people
Well,
aren't going to read what you're doing.
one final question before I let you go. You've
Sure.
already been generous with your time. Who do you endorse? You guys endorse in the mayor's race? And
We endorsed Curtis.
okay,
The reason we endorsed Curtis
and that was
is
in the general. In the general, obviously, yeah.
in the general. Yes, we didn't endorse in the primary.
Right.
The reason we endorsed Curtis is because Curtis was not only here on the west side of the peninsula. He was on the east side of the peninsula. He's been here over the last year, showing up at events. And I'll be honest with you, the only other person I have ever interviewed as an elected official, or in his case, running for office, the only other person that knew Rockaway inside and out and knew all the issues that were facing Rockaway was Anthony Weiner. The
Hmm.
only other, I mean, Curtis Slewa, when we had him here a couple of years ago when he first ran for mayor, we didn't endorse him. We didn't endorse anybody in that race. Um, I was blown away. I was like, this guy knows, like he knows the places to go, like he knows the issues. So, I wrote an editorial to, last time he ran 4 years ago, saying lose the beret and maybe we'll pay attention, but I guess, he didn't like that. He got mad at us,
Yeah.
um, but he's like,
Yeah, I mean, he's 70 years old. I agree with you.
yeah,
Come on,
but
it's time
look,
to lose the
whatever.
beret.
This time around, we just felt like he really was listening,
Yeah.
and um, our readers really like Curtis.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I know Cuomo got a lot of votes. And I think there was a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there was no way we could endorse Andrew Cuomo.
Got it.
There's
Right.
just no way. I mean,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean, Curtis is on the ground, has been on the ground forever.
yeah.
And
I mean,
he knows the neighborhoods like nobody in the city. I mean, the guy is extremely knowledge. I'm a longtime New Yorker, and the stuff that he says is amazing. And I think I know the neighborhoods pretty well. He's just at another level when it comes to that, you know. So, and I
yeah,
saw your interview. Your interview with him was a very good interview. He came
thank you,
across
thank
very
you.
well.
I
So,
just
listen,
felt like
go ahead.
at the end of the day when we endorsed Curtis, um, even though a lot of people in Rockaway did wind up voting for Cuomo, especially on the West End,
Hmm.
um, I felt like they were only doing that because
They didn't want
they weren't
Mamdani,
right. And
basically.
and I couldn't in good conscience, based on all the work that we did when Cuomo was the governor, all the things that we criticized him on, I just felt it would be disingenuous to
Well,
endorse Andrew Cuomo just because, he had the best shot of
of being,
beating, Mamdani.
you
And,
know,
to me, that's not why you endorse someone. You
well,
endorse someone because you believe that your constituents, your readers, your audience wants to have a say. And we felt that, yeah. Well, do we get people that said, "I can't believe you endorsed Sliwa"? Yeah, we did. But most of the people were happy that we endorsed Curtis, and I felt that we did the right thing.
that's journalistic integrity, as I see it. You know, you thought he was the best candidate, and you endorsed him, and I think it was the right thing to do. Obviously, a lot of dynamics came into play as
Sure,
to why people voted for Cuomo. A lot of them didn't like
of
him. They
course.
just voted for him
Right.
to
Yep.
try to stop Zoran from winning. But listen, I really thank you for your time, Mark. I appreciate it. And I look
Pleasure.
forward to staying in touch. An amazing discussion, and I look forward to people viewing it and really getting a better picture of a great newspaper and also a great editor. So thanks
Well,
again.
thanks,
Appreciate it. Thank
Sal. It's
you.
always a pleasure. Always a
Thanks a
pleasure to
lot.
talk.
Thanks, Mark.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye.